Welcome to the show. This is The Economy. I'm your host, Ibrahim Sani. In my office right now is a long-time friend of mine who just flew in from Hong Kong, apparently. Jameel Ahmad, he is the chief analyst of online trading brokerage called GTC. Jameel, this is unbelievable because you were among my first guests that I interviewed on air when I first ventured into broadcasting.
Okay.
And that was 2014, I think. And you literally just told me before the show that we were the first to interview you, to be on air as well. So we basically started our careers in the broadcasting scene in that space of time. But the last time I spoke to you was apparently in 2018. So how have you been, my friend?
It's wonderful to see you, firstly. And likewise, we have so much to catch up on. And I've always had such a soft spot for Malaysia, because you rightly pointed out, at that point when we first met, which was around 2014, 2015 time, I was just developing my career in the international field of, firstly, being an international spokesperson, discussing the world economy, no matter what region I might have been sitting in at that time. But Malaysia was the first place I came to as I was establishing myself. So at that point, I was on the fast track to becoming this global analyst.
Yeah.
Now I'd like to think I'm accelerating and coasting in the lane, but I'm so thankful for Malaysia, for people like you, for the time, and it's wonderful to be back. We have so much to catch up on.
As we age and we grow wiser, we lose hair a bit. For me, I just lost the whole thing. Yeah. And but tell me more about GTC. What is GTC? What do you guys do? And how do you guys operate?
Yeah, so we're an online trading brokerage. We've got clients from nearly 100 nationalities across the world. We also serve nearly 1 million clients across the world as well. In terms of our presence in this type of region, actually, we're not officially here. I'm just here to provide client education, to talk about global financial market trends. GTC brand I've been with them now for close to 2 years. We suit each other because I'm very passionate about providing education about global financial market trends to a worldwide audience, not always too familiar with the technicalities of financial markets and how they impact the world economy. And GTC is a brand that has core values of sharing knowledge and investing in client education. So we fit, and I'm very thankful to GTC for trusting me to come back to Malaysia and have the opportunity to sit down with you. And yeah, let's get this party going.
Yeah, okay, let's talk about some of the current events that is happening right now. That Trump is in office. Again,
Deja vu.
Deja vu. I'm one of those people that actually figured he would win against Kamala Harris. Not many people would like me, but you know, as a Chelsea fan, I would expect the obvious, even though it hurts. It is what it is.
Manchester United fan, the Glazers, I understand.
No. You guys got it worse off, right? But China is making overtures. You just came back from Hong Kong. I'm sure that the temperature there is a bit more heated than before.
Sure.
Taiwan issues happening. And of course, the GCC countries are also re-establishing themselves in the New World Order. So how does the whole geopolitics shaping up in the scene of financial markets, and how does this, I guess, impact your clients, I suppose?
Well, again, a key purpose of my role is about client education, and also my own education. Learning never stops. I started trading in the global financial crisis. I've been a global financial market strategist analyst now for more than a decade. And no 2 days are ever the same, especially in this wacky environment that we're in. In terms of what I think is, certainly we are in more uncertain times.
But would uncertain times bring better, I guess, returns if people are going into online trading and brokerage?
Well, volatility always carries opportunity, but volatility always continues to carry risk.
Yeah.
So the general guidance, as per compliance disclaimers, is if you're going to invest, and these are investments, never put in anything more into your portfolio or your capital than you're potentially willing to no longer have, because all investments carry a degree of risk. And I think that now we are living in this more sensationalist world where headlines are very catchy, it's very clickbait and so forth. Gold hits 3,000, Bitcoin 100K, everybody was waiting for that to happen. But generally anything in life, I hate to be cliche, anything that goes up can come down. And these are the return of a Twitter president. where we think something's going to happen, then it doesn't happen. These tariffs are a key indicator of that. And my general guidance as an analyst is watch what he does rather than what he says he's going to do. These tariffs are a huge obstacle for the world economy. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. At the same time, if we were going to meet just 1 month ago, we would say with some confidence that these tariffs are a negotiation tool because he was starting to roll back on tariffs, delayed tariffs and so forth. 1 month later, we have an April 2nd reciprocal tariff deadline that is looming, and we're a lot more concerned about the impact on the world economy. We've had the sharpest fall in the US dollar for a number of years because investors are starting to think actually he's very much serious. It's not a poker face. He's going to do this and it might tank the US economy, which would not be good for the world economy either. You've got financial market asset classes in terms of stock markets. Investors are taking heavy profits. I would point out that the base is very high. We are near record highs, so there is some justification to let some air out of that balloon. But generally, you also have recession indicators that are pointing up. We just came from a freak pandemic where we had a world recession and a lot of unfortunate events that I would say some economies are still facing the impacts from, to be honest.
We are still facing those impacts.
I think the region is. I was in Singapore early January. I've just come from Hong Kong and people are still wearing a mask in some degrees.
It's a lifestyle now.
Yeah, I mean, this was very close to the epicenter of where it began. And COVID was something that impacted everybody in a different way. Some in a very unfortunate, fatal way. Some when it comes to their income, some when it comes to their career growth and so forth. COVID certainly impacted me as a professional too. But what I would watch out for, coming back to what's happening today with the tariffs, is that you've got very established research houses such as PIMCO, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan Research. And each of them are up in their forecast drastically for a US recession this year. You might have seen the headlines late last week. You have, each of them was uniform. If we had this interview a few months ago, and even if you saw their research late 2024, 2025 guidance was to see roughly a 10 to 15% chance of a recession. Fast forward to just last week, each of them is more uniform now between a 35 to a 50% chance probability of a US recession, just based on tariffs. Does that matter to us where we sit now? Maybe not today. But what happens in the world's largest economy, such as the world's second largest economy, of course I'm talking about China, impacts everybody in the world economy because there is an indirect impact. Even if the volume or the quota of exports of, let's say, steel, aluminium from Malaysia to the US is low. What we don't know, and these are the indirect impacts, those economies who it does impact more, or if we're talking about electric vehicles or the alcohol taxes coming onto the European Union and so forth, those could be tremendous trading partners in Malaysia.
But China would probably stand to gain a lot here, I suppose, because as the US closed their shop or borders in a way, trade borders, wouldn't this present very interesting opportunities for China to actually make stronger relationships, especially to some interesting markets like Africa, like Asia, the rest of Asia and the like?
Yes and no. Yes, you are right in terms of China making more, I would say, momentum towards becoming a central world power. We talk about hegemony. Hegemony is about being the central authority of the world. Certainly, China can use this to close the gap on the US because the US is once again taking a more insular stance where it's turning away from certain global affairs. We can talk about what's happening in Eastern Europe, for example, where the European Union's had the door shut on it. But the United States is the aggressor in this trade war, which is impacting multiple different fronts here, not just a China issue. Let's say if it hits the China economy very hard, which the probability of that is yes, it's likely, then maybe China is going to be less able to trade, less able to establish those meaningful now relationships. Over the longer term, yes, there's an opportunity. But short-term pain versus long-term gain, that's anybody's guess now.
Let's talk a little bit more about Southeast Asia. I know you now live in Dubai,
Yes.
and you do see things that are currently happening in Southeast Asia. What we like to say here is that Malaysia is currently the ASEAN chairmanship. It moves from one country to another. Now, I don't know what that means, right? I mean, so what? And ASEAN is not like the EU. It's a loose coalition of friends getting together rather than build a policy together. I mean, we still have border controls for ASEAN members. We still, there's nothing much happening there. But is this the opportunity for us to see a single market getting closer and closer? Do you feel that that's the case? Or we still have a long way to go? And would it be a shame for us to start thinking about these long-term, I guess, blue sky situation, considering that the global affairs are currently taking place and taking shape where, global trade is in question, China is in question, Trump, being Trump, is this the time for us to, as in Southeast Asia, to get our act together and just reap what we think is possible?
I think, to use another metaphor, we can say that everything's up in the air, right?
Yeah.
Everywhere. In terms of, look, this is a region that benefited the most from the global financial crisis. Let's be honest. When there was uncertainty with world affairs, this region also managed to prosper, or at least leveled up.
Yeah.
Because I'm coming from a market, I was born and raised in the UK, where we openly say we're flatlining now. There's not much more that can be developed.
The UK is pretty bad, actually. Yeah.
And the European Union, the European Commission would release similar forecasts about their own economies. There's still room for growth here. And one of the first comments I made when I came, and I was lucky enough to come to this market 10 years ago, was that Malaysia had so much potential in different industries, also for having an English-speaking staff, international environments, people coming from so many different backgrounds, and I think a lot of that did end up bearing fruit. That's not a matter of me being right, that's a matter of the world was able to see some of the advantages of a place like Malaysia, which the Hong Kongs, the Singaporeans and so forth benefited from in their legacy a long time ago.
Yeah.
There's still room for growth here, there's still room for growth in Indonesia. And
what do you see the growth in Indonesia is, Bob?
It's so underutilized.
All right.
There's so much that Indonesia can achieve. It's got a tremendously huge population.
Have you been to Indonesia recently?
Not recently, but I'm actually intending to go quite soon.
Yeah.
The last time I was in Indonesia was actually after the last time I came here.
Yeah.
Look, it's another market where if you have the right infrastructure, if traffic is no longer such a huge, unpredictable landmine, it can take anywhere from 3 to 4 hours to do a trip from Jakarta airport to somewhere that should be 30 to 40 minutes.
Yeah.
So there's still some chaos, and some of that chaos is still prevailing, according to my friends and contacts that live there. But these are still populations that can achieve so much. I would say that the base Malaysia is coming from here is higher than Indonesia, to be blunt. But there's no reason why this region can't prosper. There's no reason why this region can't benefit from global uncertainty like it has done before. Because again, we're in a situation now where you hit the nail on the head there. The UK situation is bad. I've left the UK.
When did you leave the UK? Because the last time I checked in on you was during COVID.
Yes, and I basically regretted my decision to move back to UK from Cyprus because I moved from Cyprus back to the UK about 6-7 months before COVID hit. And COVID was a depression in the UK like it was in most places. The time
but you were telling me that you were door dashing every day, you can't leave your apartment. I remember those things.
Yes, I was trying to keep myself busy.
Sane as well, I suppose. Yeah,
like all of us. I mean, the UK had the longest lockdowns in the world. But they were also the less strict lockdowns in terms of if you wanted to go for a walk or go for a run, you could just do it. Yeah. But in terms of retail stores being closed and the rest of the country being locked down, statistically it had the highest and the longest lockdowns. But again, these are more examples. The UK's not able to adapt to this new world. If you go to the UK now, home is always home. I love my home like everybody loves their home. But you come to areas of the world where things are a lot more up to date. The UK is not up to date. The European Union is not up to date. The European Union could have been sleeping for the past 15 to 20 years because people are still talking about the impacts of the global financial crisis. That's because since then they've basically stagnated. And You might say that the Asian bloc, it's like more diplomatic friends, or maybe the unity economy-wise is not so great. But trust me, my friend, the European Union has a lot of issues. As you're seeing, there's a lot of political upheaval now within the European Union with different populist parties. Again, I'm not going to comment on whether that's right or wrong, but when you've got the Five Star Movement in Italy, Marine Le Pen is still there in France, the German government,
AfD.
yes, exactly, have just had their own somewhat right-wing swerve.
I mean, a third went to the AfD. I think more than a third. I think that's scary. It is. I mean, I don't see that. And my sister lives in Sweden, and even she was mentioning that the right-wing Swedish parties are getting a foothold. What do you make of this Ukrainian situation, prolonged Ukrainian situation? How is this impacting the markets?
Well, the European Union is the most sensitive economy towards what's happening because of the proximity, also because of the gas, the trade, and so forth. What's concerning is that it's clear the US is re-establishing ties, rightly or wrongly, with Russia and diplomatic channels with both Ukraine and Russia.
Yeah.
But it's clear as day that the European Union is having the door shut. These are closed discussions which are not involving the European Union. And a concern here, away from financial market developments, is that you're having cause for an army of Europe. Keir Starmer, the UK Prime Minister, is hosting these summits. So the UK and the European Union are communicating potential, I hate to use this word, doomsday scenarios in case things do turn for the worse. But Trump, again, whether we like how he does things or not, he promised to end this conflict.
I don't know how he can, though. I mean, I really don't know. I mean, what's your verdict on the Keir Starmer administration so far? They won, clear cut. That was an interesting election finding. And like I said, I kind of bet on it for him to win. It can't possibly be another Tory government to win. I don't know. Did you vote in the last election?
I did, and I'm on the same train of thought as you.
Yeah.
I also think that if we're looking at this objectively, the Labour government were able to use a metaphor, piggyback on what were years of a circus.
Yeah, of course. They're getting the dividends from the situation that's happening globally, I suppose.
Yeah, and the Conservative Party were, it was chaos, the way they handled COVID, the parties that were taking place.
And the prime ministers that come and go. I mean, we have our fair share of prime ministers entering and leaving the premier office, but I'm sure there's just like Malaysia, the UK and the EU, we're seeing some form or some semblance of stability in administration. And I don't know whether that's good or bad, but I'm sure it does have an impact towards investors, I suppose. They kind of see, it's a bad situation, but it's a bad situation that will probably be like that. Hence, you can make the necessary bets. Is that a way of looking at it?
Potentially. I remember last time I saw you, the UK was going through its own Brexit chaos. Yeah. And people were quite openly joking with me. Are you from Lebanon or London? And perhaps I'm more Lebanese than people would think, based on some of the uncertainty that's happening. Yeah. This is the way the world's changing. We have to be honest. You mentioned in our introduction here about the New World Order, and the world is, you know, this environment is, it's unpredictable. And certainly, you guys, yes, there's challenges, there's problems everywhere. We're not going to sugarcoat that, but it's so clear that economies like the UK, again, I'm British, and also from living in the European Union a long time, living in yesteryear times, the future's here, the future's in the GCC. Africa has a lot of potential if it can realize that potential. And some of those projections we saw in the early 2000s about the emergence of the BRICS, about how, let's say, economies such as even Nigeria, I remember Brazil and so forth, were on their way to becoming top 5, top 10 economies, and people would have laughed at that then. But if you look at how far the EU, the UK, has fallen off the game, it wasn't so far-fetched. And now we have this big question mark as to what's going to happen in the US economy, because these tariffs, The investor sentiment has completely changed. We haven't just swerved from these being a negotiation tactics. We've swerved towards a sense of panic. We've had the sharpest fall in the dollar for a number of years based on, oh gosh, if this really happens, this is going to hit the US economy hard and hardest. Because you have an economy here that was doing very well in light of all sorts of global uncertainty, very resilient. But you have an economy where the consumer accounts for as much as 70% of consumer spending. You have tariffs or taxes imposed on goods. Those extra charges get passed on to consumers. So are they able to spend so much? Question is probably not. That's why we're having this market volatility.
Well, I got two more questions before we wrap up this first part of the conversation. The first part is the UK and the EU. Does this also mean that European-based businesses would probably have no other option but to leave that market to be setting up somewhere else as their home market? Most likely than not, it's either going to be in Africa or in Asia. Is that a reality for most companies in all sectors?
Yes, I'm living in an area of the world now, the GCC, specifically in the United Arab Emirates, where the statistics are very, very clear.
Yeah.
The most millionaires and wealthy citizens that are coming in now are coming in from the UK and Europe.
Yeah.
The number of businesses that are relocating shop completely to set up their main base, head office, is in the UAE. So you're going to have some companies that have a legacy attached to certain economies, such as some companies or multinational companies will also be seen as Malaysian, always, because that's where the legacy is.
Yeah.
You will have that in the UK, the EU too. But change is always a constant. You have to always adapt to change. And the statistics are very clear that companies, people, all sorts of industries are leaving, setting up shop, shipping themselves somewhere else. And before that used to be Asia. I would say that's still somewhat of a trend that will continue. But the most of the momentum now is in the Middle East.
Okay, and the second half of the question is, you just came back from Hong Kong. What is the mood there currently? What are you observing yourself? I mean, I'm not talking about reading research reports, but your own observation.
I mean, this is the greatest advantage towards the role that I'm lucky enough to have, where I get to travel on the ground. In Hong Kong, the situation is stressed. You can see people are stressed about what the potential political change is going to be over the next couple of years. You're seeing much more of a mainland China influence in markets like Hong Kong. You're also seeing the Hong Kong economy be more sensitive to potential knock-on effects from China. So again, the last time I was in Hong Kong, actually I've been there a few times since COVID, but if I compare post-COVID to pre-COVID, there's a big change. And that change is also because of what's going to take place over the next 10 to 15 years or so.
Security level, do you feel that it's tense?
Not to the point of the protests that were taking place around 2006 and 2017. But it's clear that those native Cantonese Hong Kongers, as they're called, are likely thinking about whether they should stay in Hong Kong, should they be potentially adapting to a different environment, should they be looking at wider international options. That's likely influenced by the Greater China,
I guess, general policy. Okay, final question, Jameel, is, at least for this half, is on the GCC per se. Isn't it always the case that Dubai or UAE is the go-to market for these kind of markets, for these kind of businesses? How's Saudi faring, especially with MBS right now? He's no longer stamping his foot down, putting his foot down. It's actually, the world knows MBS, the world sees Saudi. How are the situation, what is the situation there like, and how is it progressing right now?
So I was in Saudi Arabia for the first time late 2024, so I can give you my own perspectives. In terms of the opening part of the question, you're right. When there's uncertainty in the world, the UAE benefits. Saudi Arabia benefits. The GCC itself benefits, and it's been that case since the early 2000s in the US-Afghanistan conflict, and it's still been the case from COVID, still benefiting from the conflict of Eastern Europe. In terms of what's happening in the UAE, you're having more and more Westerners relocate, as mentioned in some of the previous answers. You're also having multinational companies that are relocating to the UAE. The Saudi story is interesting. There's still a long way to go. From somebody who was there, I would say that the situation now is there's development, but there's a lot of development that's needed in order for it to compete with a market like the UAE. But it has huge budgets, it has huge potential, and they're probably going to move the goalposts in line for when the World Cup takes place around 10 years from now.
Yeah.
And that will probably be...
There's also a story on how they got the bid won in the first place. It's
the same with Qatar. That ended up being a successful tournament, to be fair.
Yeah.
But that's going to be, in my opinion, as an economist, international analyst level, that's going to be in the introduction to Saudi Arabia to the world economy.
Oh, you think so?
Yes, because the infrastructure will be set up, stadiums, the tourism.
Yeah.
Again, I've been in the UAE now for a long time as somebody who would go for media interviews and so forth. What's happening in Saudi Arabia today, it seems like what was happening in the UAE maybe in the late 90s, maybe some would say the late 80s, I'm not sure about that. Saudi Arabia still has a lot of development that's needed. For example, you go to the airport and you don't actually have airport taxis yet. You have to rely on Ubers, Careems. I think you guys have Grab as the local equivalent. So there's still some infrastructure that's needed to make things a bit more simpler. The roads, the infrastructure still needs some development, but it is a tremendously large market. I mean, if you look at Saudi Arabia in terms of its population, how large the country is, it's going to take time, but MBS is very ambitious. Saudi Arabia, Riyadh and Dubai want to be seen as the two financial market capitals of the world. And the UAE is already on that road to establishment. With the financial revenues, the budgets and the ambitions that Saudi Arabia has, 10 years from now, likely they would achieve that goal.
So what's going to happen is we're gonna make this interview into two halves. We're going to add this part of the discussion this week, and we'll continue speaking with Jameel, and we'll air it during Eid period. But that part we're going to be talking about much more than financial markets. We're going to be talking about a bunch of other stuff, and why Manchester United will win the Premier League next year, I suppose.
And before we do that, I just want to say Eid Mubarak to everyone, and it really is wonderful to be back in Malaysia.
Eid Mubarak, Selamat Hari Raya. See you in the next episode. For now, if you want to learn more, just head on to astroawani.com, look for The Economist, or look for GTC or Jameel Ahmad. Until then, thanks very much for watching. Catch you in the next episode.